Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here this evening. We have reached quorum, letting you know that our chair, Shelley Foster, sends her regrets and has appointed Jennifer Knight to be the chair for this evening. To you, Jennifer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're about to call this meeting to order, and we have regrets from Lucas Gallows, Jeffrey Clark, and Shelley Foster. And we will now view the acknowledgement of their traditional territories.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe-Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Moving on to the approval of the agenda, can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee approves the agenda for the October 15th, 2024 meeting? Thank you, Barb. And a second, do I have a second, Barb? Thank you. And all in favor? Great. Declaration, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? I see none. Can I, onto the approval of the minutes, can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory approves the minutes of the September 17th, 2024 meeting? Or again? Second? Andrew? And all in favor? Great. Okay, on to 6, delegations, public questions. It looks like there are no delegations this evening. And we're on to the superintendent report.
Great, thank you. And I'll just ask Pat, as I'm reading, to hand out a paper copy as requested to all SEAC members. Good evening. What an amazing start to the new year that we've had. I'm excited to share the highlights from our recent special education conference, which brought together administrators and educators from every single school in the PDSB for an inspiring day of learning and collaboration. Differentiated learning was offered to educators and administrators on September 24th, 25th, and 26th. And this included learning around administrators in special education, leadership, mentorship, and collaboration in special education, roles, responsibilities, and services of the special programs team, PSSP, what we can do for you, supporting students with complex needs through trauma-informed approaches, the I and IEPs, individualizing the individual education plan, and SEAC claims, a hands-on introduction to SEAC IT. Feedback from this event shared that the learning was truly remarkable, showcasing our collective commitment to enhancing programming for exceptional students. With a diverse range of workshops led by the Special Education Department and other participating departments, participants engaged in meaningful discussions around best practices, innovative, culturally responsive, and developmentally appropriate instructional strategies, and the latest developments in special education. Most importantly, we talked about systems of monitoring for impact that includes the voice of students and families. In addition to the conference, I am pleased to announce that with the support of the Director's Office, we have added over 75 educational assistants in schools across the PDSB. Allocations were supported by the special program team, who visited each and every school to look at SIP, which is student independent scores, to determine allocations. This increase in educational assistance is crucial in providing personalized care to our exceptional students, allowing them to thrive academically and socially. By enhancing our capacity, we are ensuring that each student receives the individualized attention they need to succeed. Our commitment to collaboration with the SEAC committee remains strong. We are actively seeking your insights and expertise to inform our practices and to ensure our programs reflect the diverse needs of our students and families. Together, we will work on initiatives that promote inclusion and provide resources that empowers educators and families alike. As we move forward, let's continue to foster an environment where every student feels valued and supported. Thank you for your ongoing dedication and hard work to making this a positive impact on the lives of our exceptional students. Together, I really do truly believe we're building a brighter future for all learners in PDSB, and I continue to be hopeful for the learning improvements ahead. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
But it's not a question, it's an observation. The date on the top is October 2025.
Oh,
2024. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very well prepared. Trust me.
Anyone else? Any comments or questions? I do have a couple regarding the EA. You've added 75 educational assistants, which is great. Do we have any numbers on how many unfulfilled EA spots we have on a daily basis for this year?
Through you, Chair, that data is run daily, and that can be something that we add to the motion action log. I do not have data with me on fill rates.
I think we did ask for it last year to come back.
We did, and we brought it back. The manager of Human Resources, Massimo Kangura, did bring numbers back to us last year, but I'm not sure if she just stepped out, but maybe she'll be able to answer that. If not, we can add it to the motion action log.
But the 75 is a response to the openings that it seems like, correct?
So I'll ask coordinating principal Erla Jacket to talk through the very comprehensive process led by her and coordinating principal Joel Sultanitis on behalf of the team and our special programs resource teachers.
Through you, Chair. So throughout the month of September, our special programs resource teachers went into schools to check to see if the students that we were expecting in the mainstream arrived, and we accounted for every student in each school, both the ones that had arrived and we were expecting based on our student independence form data, but also those for whom we were waiting to process. So if we had planning for entry, so students newly coming into us, we made sure that we quickly entered that data in the student independence forms, and we got full accounting of every student's levels of independence and brought those back and reviewed them carefully, and then made allocations according to each student and the allocation of assessed need for the students. And that's why we had to come forward and request more EA score system supports throughout the mainstream.
Okay, so these are 75 additional. This doesn't account for any absences and these types of things. This is an additional 75 person need that we're looking at.
Correct.
How many of our EA positions are full? Have we got those 75 already?
So we don't have fill rates as to if what percentage of jobs are filled or not. I'm looking at our HR manager, Massimo Kangura, who might be able to give us more details for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We know staff absenteeism certainly is a challenge. We do continual hiring throughout the year, so we're not doing like phases. Our job posting is open continuously, and we continue to hire for EA positions. We know we've got competing interests with attraction in these roles. And I would just say that it is a challenge. It's a real challenge, and we continue to advocate with the ministry in whichever avenue we can to really take a look at these positions and what they entail. We also know that post-COVID, our injury rates with this group have significantly increased, and so that's why we have intermittent staff absenteeism to a higher extent, because there's re-entry and leaving the position, getting better, coming back, and certainly having those challenges with filling them on a temporary basis.
The reason I ask these questions is because I'm regularly getting calls from parents where EAs are absent. There is no one filling those positions. Students are or EAs are being taken from one student or a need in another area of the school. So just trying to understand what we're doing. Again, we had this conversation many times, but we really need to understand how we're going to serve the students the best. So another question I had is, are parents being informed when an EA support is not available for their student?
Through you, Chair, that is the responsibility of the principal. Communication happens from the principal to families. Allocations are given to the school, not to individual students. So the principal then has the authority to distribute the EAs based on the needed safety and continued care and well-being of the students that they have. So you may see shifts throughout the instructional day if there are absences, because it is the principal's responsibility to ensure the safety and continued learning for students.
So I think it would be helpful to have those numbers on a monthly basis if that was possible, because we can understand things are getting better or worse. We can help. Like, I don't even know what to tell a parent right now because you're telling me it's a problem. We all know it's a problem. But that doesn't help when the student's either not able to go to school or is not being cared for or is getting in situations where their needs are not being met. So I think at least if we're tracking the numbers maybe here, I'm sure you guys are, but I would like to be able to see the numbers as well on a monthly basis and see that whatever it is we are doing is actually making a difference. And in the meantime, I'm not sure if anyone has any advice for these parents that don't know from one day to the next whether they'll be able to send their student to school.
Through you, Chair, if there ever is a question of the safety of students, then the principal would have the responsibility to call parents and let them know that they wouldn't be able to come. And we are tracking that as per request from last year through the field superintendent. So if there is any class closure or any students are staying home, we are tracking that diligently.
So that would be good data to have as well. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a comment. Yeah. So I'm the material. So you mentioned something about injury to the EAs, right? So recently we were contacted by a parent where the EAs in the class were continuously missing. Okay, so it turns out that when the cohort was constituted, it was first time in that school. There were some kids who were extremely loud, for the lack of a better word, in our behaviors such as, which is very common in ours in terms of hit banging or like banging the table, just extremely loud environment. And there were some other people, kids in the class who get triggered by such behavior. Now, when the IPRC put that cohort together, in all likelihood, this behavior were not properly documented in the IPRC inputs. So I would assume that, such cohort will not get formed. But as a result, the EAs in that class where either they were trying to manage a child who got triggered very severely by that behavior, or they're trying to manage kids who are, triggering that. Now, obviously, I'm not going to follow the kids in this case, but the cohort got formed, unfortunately. A lot of the IPRC inputs which come in today's, given, a lot of new students to the board and new students to particularly expanding areas, are probably need to be looked at when it goes to IPRC inputs moving forward, to ensure they are complete in terms of the safety aspects, so that the cohorts are manageable, for the lack of a better word, by the EAs, because that definitely will be a concern, if the EAs are getting injured and that role has such kind of a perception. It's difficult to get trained childhood educators, and then if there is some issues about getting injury in Peel District School Board, that's going to be a problem, right? So.
And through you, Chair, I will say that our special programs resource teachers are very aware of all of the dynamics of those classes and are in schools and working alongside of educators and EAs all the time. And then any situation that they feel like there is a reconsideration for the way that the class, the makeup of the class and any changes that need to happen, they bring that to the coordinating principals and to my attention as well. And we do make shifts, mid-year shifts as necessary in collaboration with families, centering families' voices, all this through that. But thank you for that feedback.
Questions? Amy, may I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the superintendent's oral report? Andrew, perfect. And second? Yeah, perfect. All in favor? Great. Thank you. Next, we're on to the budget and financial report.
Sorry. Hi, guys. Sorry, I just had a question. Can I just jump in and ask a question? My question was around, I think I caught that there was like a 75 per special resource teacher, like a 75 number increase from last year to this year, or is that like, I guess I'm just wondering why there's such a big gap Wouldn't we have projected that we needed more special resource teachers like year over year in our plan? Like, why is there such a big discrepancy in what we are getting versus what we need?
Through you, Chair, just to clarify, these are 75 additional education assistants, not special programs resource teachers. Special programs resource teachers oversee program, they build teacher capacity, they help with student intake, planning for entries. So we were allocated 75 additional educational assistants, which are generated through planning for entries. Often that come through the summer or over the summer break. So hard to predict without verifying a student need by our special programs resource teachers. So we were spent the month of September verifying the data and collating the data to determine what schools would be allocated additional. Thank you.
Are you okay, Jenny? Is that good?
Yeah, I think that explains it. So I think what I'm hearing is as the kids come in and they enroll, they identify, and then that kind of recalibrates what you need for the EA support, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, pass it to the Superintendent Scotto to introduce the budget financial report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would like to introduce Tanya Charles, the Controller of Finance Support Services, who will be sharing her oral report with a visual. We also have a handout available for SEAC members.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So let's just look at the agenda. So today our agenda this evening is based on the ask that we received from the Special Advisory Committee on the type of information that you had wanted to see previously. It will cover the various funding that we use towards special education expenses. It will cover the grants that are specifically special education. There was also an ask to see what specific special education business cases were approved for 2024. As well as we will look at the special education expenditures based on the type of expenditure and then by the area of expense. Finally, I know there was an ask to really look at some of the details. So there will be a detailed review of expenses. And finally, we will look at a 5-year overview of the shortfall of our spec expenses. Okay, so with that, I draw your attention to this slide. So this slide speaks to the special education funding. And on the first line, you will see the special education grant allocations from the ministry. So I will be talking about them in greater detail on the next slide. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, but you can see that we get about $229 million, almost $300 million specifically around special education grants. However, on the slide, you can see that the funding in this line has been relatively stable despite our enrollment decline, and I'm sure you have been briefed on that. So when we look at our enrollment decline within this period, enrollment has been reduced by about 10,000 students over this period of time. So when you look at the funding, it's remained relatively stable. And the reason enrollment matters, and the reason I'm mentioning it is because in a lot of the grants, enrollment is a key factor in how the grants are calculated. So on this slide, when you look at 23-24 as compared to 24-25 specifically, you can see that there's been an actual increase in the special education grants. So I'm going to mention it here, although I think I'm going to also mention it on the next slide, but it's interesting that there's been an increase in between 23-24 and 24-25. However, we must remember that, as I mentioned, a lot of our funding is related to staffing. And so in 23-24, the ministry settled a lot of their collective agreements with most of our union groups. So as a result, the increase reflected in the numbers is the ministry flowing more funds to us so that we can in turn pay higher salaries to our staff members. So as a result, there's no real new funding, and actually in most cases, there's been an overall decrease in our funding overall. So if you go to the next line, you can see it's called local priorities grants. So this funding is also sometimes termed as student success funding. And this money flow to the board as part of also collective bargaining through various union groups. It allows the boards in discussion with the various union groups to determine local needs in terms of staffing. As a board, we received approximately 16 million in local priorities funding in both 23-24 and 24-25. However, once you take out the QP components, if you recall, I mentioned it's by union, there's about $12 million in local priorities fundings that we did receive. And so overall, if we receive 12 million, you can see that for special education, we've allocated almost 50% of that to special education. The next line talks about deferred special education funds. So special education funding is enveloped in its entirety. However, in the past, what was the subcomponents of special education were also enveloped. And so what that meant, it was that if there was a specific component of special education grant that was not used, it could be deferred to be used at a later point. And so the past has resulted in some deferred funds that we are now able to use or we've been using over the various years. For 2024-25, the ministry has now changed the enveloping rules, and that's why you will see there's kind of a big jump in what we are projecting to use for special education in terms of deferred grants. And that's because the ministry has determined to, rather than have sub-envelopes within special education, to have one large envelope, which then allows us to use the deferred grants that we had towards any part of special education that is required. And so for 2024, we're projecting to use 2.7 million, and that will effectively pretty much use up all the deferred funds that we had in the past. The next line is the line called Priorities and Partnership Fund. And if you notice, we marked it COVID because during that period of time, we did receive, or most boards received significant funding to support the needs of students during COVID. And these were time-bound funds. And so as you can see, we're no longer receiving them. And the last line of on the slide is called the People Foundation Grant. And I know there was an ask to understand sort of what part of the normal grants for student needs, now called core ed grants, are allocated towards spec ed. So the ministry has a specific formula that is looking at contained classrooms and looking at the students that are in those classes. And from that, we then allocate that funding towards special education. So if you look at those various components, you can see that in total, we get about 257 million that goes towards special education in terms of the various funding. If we go now to the next slide. So the next slide is really just an expansion of the one row on the slide previously. And for special education grants specifically, there are 4 different allocations. So the first allocation is for overall, is per pupil, and is based on overall enrollment. So as mentioned on the previous slide, the increase, even though it's not hugely significant, is just under $1 million, is still deceiving because actually we actually received 2.6 in this line for salary increases. But that's been netted with about $1.7 million due to enrollment decline. So really that's why you're getting a net of 900,000. So in effect, there's a 1.7 million decline in this line in terms of per pupil allocation, and that's directly attributable to our enrollment decline between 23-24 and 24-25. The next slide, the differentiated needs allocation has 2 main drivers. One is the measure of variability, and the second is the special education statistical prediction model. So both of those are quite complicated calculations, and we actually don't see all the inputs because they're based on a lot of data and census information. And so these are calculated and then allocated to us by the ministry. The good news is that the ministry did begin to transition to more current census data from before it was 2006. Now they moved to 2021. So they are starting to use more current data. Unfortunately, the net result for us is only about 160,000 increase. From that perspective, some of it is related to the measures of variability declining versus the statistical prediction model increasing. So the next line is called the complex supports allocation. So this grant is for students that need more than 2 full-time board staff for support. So currently the ministry is using an interim calculation based on the prior year with adjustments made for salary. So again, because this allocation really is significantly based on headcount, most of that increase is due to the change in the benchmarks for salary changes. And the last line here is SEAC, which is specialized equipment allocation. And this also has 2 components. One is a formula component and the other one is a claim-based component. So even though the ministry did change how it's calculated, overall, it's remained relatively stable in terms of overall dollars that we'll be receiving. So this slide kind of breaks down that line from the first page. So that the $229 million that you see there. The next slide speaks to the special education business cases. I think there was an ask to understand what business cases were approved within this area. So every year, various areas present business cases for consideration for the budget. Superintendent Staccato presented various business cases based on the needs identified by special education. For 24-25, it was especially challenging given the continued enrollment decline and our obligation to balance the budget. Our trustees approved the use of reserves to balance our budget, and as part of the approval process, they approved business cases that were deemed critical to our ability to support our students. As you can see, 56% or in dollar value, or $10.3 million, was approved to support special education students through business cases this year. And again, even though on this slide you can see 125 educational assistants, as Superintendent Staccato mentioned, there has been another 75 added, so that's not even captured within the slide. So that's in addition to what was approved during the budget process. And just for clarity, our budgets are done in June, and that's again why sometimes we don't know the full result until later in the year. So going to the next slide, these slides look at more of the expense component. When we look at our expenses around special education, we spend about $300 million. As this pie chart shows, I tried to do it in terms of the type of expense so that we can see what is going towards staffing, equipment and supplies, fees and contract, and staff development. As you can see from the slide, we have 94% of our expenses within special education going directly to students. What that means is staff that actually interact directly with students. And if you add in addition to the 2% of support staff, then that's about 96% of our total expenses going towards staffing. And support staffing would be individuals, the coordinators or resource teachers, and yes, the lovely superintendent Staccato, who are supporting the whole system. So if you can see, that's how it's split in terms of type of expense. The next slide is similar. As you can see, it still adds up to the $300 million, and this is really by area. Oh, sorry. I think when it's large, it might not look. Oh, yeah, by area. And so the only difference in this is it really looks at it in a different lens. And here you can see that we spend 91% of our special education expenses within the classroom, directly with students. 4% is for support type expenses. CM makes up 3% and 2% is ECPP. So ECPP is the Education and Community Partnership Program, and that relates to like Roy McMurtry in Section 23. Okay, so I apologize for the size, but I thought it would be good to have it sort of on one page. So it's easier to understand how all these expenses roll together. And I believe you have a handout. So basically, what this is trying to show, because I believe the committee had asked for it, is trying to get an understanding of the types of staffing and the cost. And so if you look on the left of the spreadsheet, you will see the type of expenditure. And again, in most cases, they're types of positions. If relevant, if it's a position, the next column shows the FTE or head count. And you can see in terms of head count, for the special education area, there are 3,280.8 FTE. And it just should be noted as well that this actually does not include additional dollars that we spend towards supply teachers, nor things like our lunchroom supervisor. So if you can see, we have supply teachers on the second line for about 4 million with no FTE attached. And the reason that is because they're not full FTEs. So, I mean, we could calculate FTE, but these are not headcount per se. We use them as needed. And lunchroom supervisors as well. They're a portion of a day. They're not full day, but again, those are also staffing supports that are supporting the students in the school. And then the next called central cost. Those are costs for central departments that support the overall system. The next column is SEA. So again, we're required to track SEA separately, and that would include things like the equipment and the staffing supports for setting up the equipment and training and so forth would be in the SEA column. Classroom or school, those are the costs within the classroom. And that's why you see the bulk of it. Obviously, the cost for EA, the bulk of it is within the classroom, the teachers and so forth. So those are those costs. And the last column before the total is the ECPP, which would be Roy McMurtry and the Section 23 costs. So again, in total, this chart again adds up to 300 million, and that was just kind of a summary in more detail as the committee wanted to see. And then finally, our last slide, which is probably the more familiar slide, is the one that kind of shows a 5-year trend. I will just bring you first to the very bottom at the end so you can recognize the numbers. You can see we've been talking about the revenue of 257 million, which was the different components we talked in the first few slides, and then the expenses of 300 million. So if you look at that, there's a delta of 43.6 million projected for this year, 24-25. And then you can see from a 5-year perspective that our expense growth has been about 14.2%, which is significantly outpaced the revenue growth, even taking into account the salary increases that really are a flow through, so our overall revenue growth has only been about 2% during the same period. And with that, I think that's the end of my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that. Open up to the floor. Any questions?
Through the chair, with quick questions really. What's the role of a child care practitioner? That's not a terminology that I have come across.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Child and youth care practitioners, or CYCPs, work directly with students who are exhibiting stress behaviors. So their training allows them to work on co-regulation strategies, dysregulation, making sure that students are in a calm, supportive environment and they have the strategies that they need to de-escalate.
Another question is that the psychoeducational consultants, they are not actually in the classrooms, right? They are.
but they work directly with the students. So they do work, our psychoeducational consultants do work directly with students. So they are in the schools performing their assessments with schools, of course, with family consent. So they are considered a student-based support because they work directly with students.
Yeah, I mean, they do the assessments as well, the same group of people, right? They do the assessments, they're the same people.
Yes, they do the assessments, yes. So working with students and families directly.
Okay, so I've come across like people from Erenok, the SLPs as well as OTs doing therapies in school because we get emails for consent and stuff. So are they accounted for as this budget or that's something else?
No, that is a separate funding mechanism and they are a partner. So we have internal occupational therapists here at the board. And you'll remember from our last presentation, we went from 3 to 9 this year with a supervisor who's here with us tonight. But we work in partnership with Aaron Oaks. They provide both OT and PT services to the board at their expense, not ours.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Online?
Oh, Jesse.
Yeah, go ahead, Josie.
Hi, I was just wondering in that breakdown, where is vision supports allocated in that breakdown in the Excel spreadsheet?
So vision supports would be considered a direct expense, working directly with students. So they'd be on that top 90% that controller Charles was talking about.
Okay, and then what is that enrollment like last year versus this year? Has that gone up? Like when you did that calibration that you were talking about for EAs, did that calibration happen for all supports like vision itinerants?
The vision itinerants remain consistent to the numbers that we shared at the start of the year in the chart. And I'll ask coordinating principal Jet Bertrand to share the numbers that we have.
There's some questions on the chat.
Oh, yeah, I'm just going to let Jeff answer that question.
So through you, Chair, we have 9 vision itinerants at the moment.
Okay, so that remained consistent from last year. And then what is funding or the process like for orientation and mobility this year? Like have we allocated for that? Were we able to hire for that?
Through you, Chair, we have allocated for that. That is currently being held in reserve right now, and we have continued to post and reach out to the ministry. We have a meeting with CNIB coming up in the next few weeks to try to problem solve together around the inability for us to hire, which again is a provincial shortage. I continue to hear from my colleagues across the province with similar concerns around the inability to hire. But it has been allocated and is in reserves for when we can hire somebody.
Was there any thought this year put into like getting like an external, like we have, I don't know if with occupational therapy or any other type of therapy, we reach out externally and kind of get someone on contract for the board, but was there any thought put into getting orientation mobility specialists as like maybe not hired on from the board, because I understand that, there's a process, but just as I guess under like a contractor consultation, or I don't know what the appropriate word is, but like have we reached out to other companies or other individuals that provide support to boards, like, because I know 2 years ago or 3 years ago the Peel board had individuals come in and it was sort of like outsourced. I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology, but I'm just wondering if there's been some thought put into that, if the position still remains vacant.
Through you, Chair, yes, it is a contract position. It is not somebody that is permanently on staff. So it is the way that we're trying to go to make sure we can attract and retain anybody that has the qualifications. One of the shortcomings is that the only ability to be qualified happens in British Columbia, and there's not any current certifications here in Ontario, which is a concern that we've again raised with the Ministry of Education and their counterparts at universities.
Questions? As well as if there's something in the chat, I can't see it here.
Yeah, the question, I read the question, I can just relate.
Perfect, yeah.
So, so Drew, the question was, there's a deficit that's shown at the end of the slides deck. The question was, how is the deficit managed? I mean, you cannot probably be keeping a shortfall of expenses at the end of the year. That was the question actually on the chat.
Through you, Chair. So the slide that was shown is as the deficit as it specifically relates to special education. However, the board itself is in a deficit this year. So as a board, and all boards are required to have a balanced budget. And so obviously through the budget process, we worked to try and prioritize and determine how best to bring our expenses in line with a balanced budget. We also obviously talk or lobby with the ministry around areas where we believe we need additional funding. And you know, supply costs have created a lot of pressures across the province in terms of supply teacher costs. So that's one area that we continue to talk with the ministry. We've been fortunate that our trustees have allowed us to use our reserves, at least in the short term. But yet certainly during the budget process, we look to understand how we can better align to our requirement to have a balanced budget. But it's definitely been a challenge. And this year in 23-24, we had projected about a $28 million deficit as a board. We have brought it down to about 11 million overall as a board for 24-25. And I think that's why I was mentioning that when we went through the business case process, it was very, very challenging because we really had to prioritize in order to minimize the deficit we had overall as an organization. So it's a challenge and we continue to work on it. And we obviously seek input around priorities during the budget process when tough choices need to be made.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I will also share that our Board of Trustees has written a letter to the ministry talking about the shortfall in special education and the shortfall of funding that continues to impact students and families.
Yeah, some questions. I have a couple. Thank you for putting this all together. I really appreciate this. This is helpful. So when you talk about the classroom teachers, homeschool instructors, 945 change full time. So those are students that are directly working with students with special education needs. So not that are.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that does not account for classroom teachers where students are in mainstream.
No, these are not through staffing. These are not staffed as the mainstream classrooms. These are staffed as special education teachers.
Okay. And then the 202,174 EAs, does that include the new 75?
Through Chair, no, they do not. Yeah, so through Chair, these numbers are reflective of what was approved in the budget, just so that to make sure that everything tied in. So everything that's happened from the approved budget point afterwards that you may get information from would be added.
That's great. And so what is the main thing that's driving that 14% increase?
Through you, Chair. I mean, I can only speak to a little bit of it, and certainly Sabrina and Sagato can speak to the rest because she can speak to the need. I can speak to some of the dollars. I think some of the dollars are driven really by, as I said, the high pressure, and not just in special education, but across the whole board around supply costs, and the fact that we are not fully funded for teacher absences. And as you may know, the amount of sick days that people get are significant. And so depending on the needs of an employee in terms of their wellness, sometimes their use of those days are relatively significant. And then finding supply teachers to cover that is an additive cost. So that's one area. And there's also some certain areas that the ministry doesn't fund us fully, like, in terms of how they do their formulas. Special education would be one of them. Transportation is another. So there's a lot of different areas. And so again, we're very watchful in those areas. And those are the areas that we speak to the ministry about and continue to provide feedback. The ministry certainly has tried to adjust some formulas, but again, things are changing rapidly. So even as we talked about, the census has moved to 2021, we're already in 2024, and things are changing rapidly in a lot of different areas. So I get those are the financial pieces.
And through you, Chair, from a special education lens, it would be the level of complexities of students that we are seeing require more comprehensive supports and professional learning, as well as families advocating for an increase. Our first placement is always a regular mainstream classroom, as per Learning for All, Special Education in Ontario, but there is an increased demand for congregated programming, which again, as you know, has smaller class sizes.
So when you talk about the supply costs increasing, is it increasing more for teachers in special education classrooms? Because it sounds like from what you said, in the mainstream, we don't have this kind of deficit. We actually are able to make up for this deficit. So is there a big difference in the absentee rate in a special education classroom versus a mainstream?
Through you, Chair. We don't track it, well, at least not from the financial perspective, between special education versus non-special education for supply costs. We look at them overall. And we look at the average. So the average days being used, although they've come down a bit, they're significantly more than what we're funded. So I know there's been a lot of work by our system in terms of wellness to try and keep teachers safe and healthy through, again, during COVID, there was a lot of absences as well. So things have improved a little bit. But with this, certainly from a funding perspective, we don't get funded to the same degree as the absence rates are. But in terms of when we talk about our overall deficit, we don't really split it that way. I mean, for special education, we can track the grants and that. And there's enveloping where in some of the other areas, there's more flexibility. And that's why we are able to put some of our other funds towards supplementing special education needs. So obviously, if there is a delta between our funding and spend in special education, we have to look at other areas where there's more flexibility. And that's where we use those funds.
Any other questions around the table or online? Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the budget and the financial report? Barry and Susan and everyone in favor? Great. Thank you for that. It's good to see the numbers and understand everything for myself anyway. Understand a little bit better what we're handling. All right, so we're moving on to 7.3, the PDSB multi-year accessibility plan update. I'll turn that over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I would like to ask Massimo Canfor, Executive Officer of Human Resource Partnerships and Equity, and Candace Naiman, the Manager of Abilities and Attendance, to present this report.
Thank you, Superintendent Scotado. And through you, Chair, I will introduce Candace Naiman, the Manager of Abilities, Wellness and Attendance for the board, to present the report.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Candace Naiman. I'm the Manager of Abilities, Wellness and Attendance. I'm here today to present an update on where we are with the PDSB accessibility plan. And just for some context, my role with respect to accessibility portfolio is sort of twofold. On one hand, one part of my role is to sort of get together all of the subject matter experts in the different departments and gather all the information from them to inform the accessibility plan and get updates on the work that's being done. And secondly, I am the liaison between PDSB and the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. So in terms of compliance reports, it does come through me. I do, again, collaborate with the other stakeholders of which, the questions are for, and I gather that information and enter in the compliance reports. Okay. So with that, a few things that we're going to be reviewing today is the committee structure, as well as an update on our multi-year accessibility plan, and then provide you with some updates on where we are with the current work in accessibility. Okay, so just high-level summary. We have an accessibility advisory committee that reports into the director's office. And I will be going over who's a part of this, each of the individual committee. But in general, we have senior leadership that sits on this committee from each of the impacted or the contributing departments. And feeding into or informing the accessibility advisory committee we have our Accessibility Working Group Working Committee, the AWC, and this is comprised of sort of the subject matter experts that are closer to the operational tasks and the plans and the work that's being done. We also receive feedback from disability interest groups such as yourselves, SEAC, as well as other employee resource groups. We do have 2 groups currently and 1 newer group, employee resource group, which is the disability representing resource group. Within the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I did say that, just to reiterate, it is made up of senior leaders who are able to direct the work within their own teams. We have included in the previous year the special education and social emotional learning, facilities, environmental support services, which also includes planning and accommodation at the time. We also have our equity department, our learning technology support services, which includes media as well as the communications area, as well as our human rights office, several areas of human resources office, as well as legal and governance. We have sort of learned with the different shuffles and changes to our structure, our organizational structure, there will be some additional teams and representatives who will be invited to the advisory committee. Then we have our Accessibility Working Committee. Again, these are sort of the representatives who are carrying out the day-to-day operations, functions, and the specific plans that each individual department has determined. And this includes more specific teams within the second department, media support, and the IT, yeah. Sorry, my mistake. Also planning accommodation support services and the transportation team as well. We have equity team, communications, workplace equity, human resources, and my department as well from the staffing perspective and accommodations, health and safety, as well as the innovation and research team. Okay, so for a bit of an update on the accessibility plan, we had a plan, a multi-year plan that reached from 2020 to 2022. In November of 2022, I did review the accessibility plan with my team, as well as we were required to submit a compliance report, a desk audit for AODA. And following this review, we regathered the different components or the stakeholders of the advisory committee. And we met in March 2023 to start developing and looking at the following multi-year plan for 2023 and 2025. And through this meeting, we did make recommendations to direct the Accessibility Working Committee to start gathering information and developing a plan of what their individual departments would be seeing or working towards in an accessibility plan. This final draft of the multi-year plan was completed in November of 2023 and was approved by the advisory committee, with the next steps to be shared at SEAC for feedback, as well as the other employee resource groups. Okay. So following that, in early 2024, we did identify that there were a couple of pending projects that we thought would further inform the multi-year plan. And that would be the analysis of the student census data. While we did receive the numbers, we were looking to see if there was a further analysis of how it may impact the work that we're doing from an accessibility perspective, as well as the development of the PDSB strategic plan for 2024 and 2028. So at that time, we had made the recommendation to ensure that the multi-year accessibility plan was in alignment with the upcoming PDSB strategic plan, as well as secondarily to continue to make sure that the accessibility work from the 2020-2022 plan was going to continue and remain status quo. So we wouldn't want to stop any of the work that was being done, but we ensure that it continued on and continued to work through that until a plan was implemented. So we are at the stage right now where we do have a draft that has been included in this presentation. And so we are asking that the members of SEAC review this multi-year plan for 2024, 2025, and provide feedback. We have created a feedback form that's online, but we can also make a paper copy available as well. Claudine's team has graciously agreed to collect the information and then bring it back to myself so that we can collect collect all the feedback from the other areas, the other employee resource groups, and collate it together to further inform the multi-year plan. We are hoping that we will be able to collect everybody's feedback before the next SEAC meeting, so in about, I believe, a month's time. If we do need an extension, we're okay with that as well. The advisory committee is next meeting in November, and we'll be reviewing the outcome of it from the feedback.
And just through you, Chair, my assistant Pamela will be sending out the feedback form link to all SEAC members via email tomorrow for ease of access to all of you.
Okay, so now I have some updates and some sort of key areas that we would like to focus on in the next little bit, sort of as we continue to develop the actual plan. So first off, I just want to talk about the compliance reports. So again, annually, we do have a compliance report that is submitted to the accessibility office, and that's my area that would submit that. We were selected for desk audits, so for additional audits, and this is a random selection. One was in 2021, and we were in compliance with that and able to provide the information requested, as well as we were just recently selected for another one in August of this year. Most of the questions centered around the student transportation portfolio, and that has been completed. And we are currently working on the annual compliance report to be submitted by December. Okay. There are a lot of projects that are being tackled by the individual groups, but some of the ones that I wanted to sort of highlight for this group is as follows. So reviewing our accessibility training programs, although we are in compliance with the standards, there is some more work that needs to be done to keep up with the evolution of needs as well as technology as well. So we are currently going to be looking at our training programs for educators specific, as well as for all staff and leadership. Our feedback mechanisms were also identified as needing to be updated. We did identify through this compliance reports as well that although we do have feedback mechanisms, they do need to be a little bit more accessible. So for example, we will be including the feedback mechanisms on each individual school site in paper format as well as online as well. As well as the last year, and I'm glad I have Massimo here with me, we are doing a lot of work on the employment services review that talks a lot about how we accommodate staff, both physically, from a mental well-being perspective, and also from an equity perspective as well. And lastly, I do have the last building accessibility report. We are targeted for compliance by 2025, and we will be getting an update, evaluation or reevaluation survey from the planning and accommodation group by the end of this year. So this is not an exhaustive list, but here are I just want to share with you some of the projects that, are sort of at the forefront that we can share. And that's what I have for the update. I'm happy to take any questions. Any questions on the floor online?
Few. So I did look through the plan already. And I'm just a little bit confused in that a lot of the goals and strategies for removing barriers are identical to the 2020 document. And the actions to be taken are the same, but the dates have just been changed to the 2028.
Yeah, so we did, again, these are our plans that were provided by the individual teams. We have highlighted that we were looking for some more specifics on timelines and more details as to what each of their goals are. So we have highlighted that they are a bit broad and just more continuing the work that has already been done. So we are going back to some of the teams to get more specific in timelines on what their plans are.
Yeah, it would be nice to see some data, as this was our goal in 2020. How much of that have we accomplished, if any? And what are our new add-ons to that we're gonna, because this looks like we haven't done anything since 2010, we're just gonna keep going. That's what I read when I look at this, and I hope that's not what's happening within the board.
No, absolutely not. But I do hear your feedback, and we did highlight that already to the teams to go back and provide. We know that they are doing a lot of work. There has been a lot of evolution and improvement to our systems and processes, but I agree, it does need to be more detailed in what specifics have been done, and what their specific goals are moving forward.
So yeah, definitely that needs to happen. Attitudinal and awareness section. I think we need to spend a lot of time on this section. I think we need to include things that have been admitted here in the SEAC meeting, that having special education needs causes student stigmatization or reduced expectation from teachers. That's something that should be here. We should be working on, and what specifically are we doing to address that? Right. I know in my community, we feel like really not a lot has changed since 2020, to be perfectly honest. I get complaints fairly regularly from different, I represent Easter Steels, so physical disabilities, so cases of ableism, inaccessibility, all that kind of thing. So what I see here does not reflect what our students are seeing. We're not working on the right things. We're not being specific. We're not improving. So I think we need to be much better at that. I did want to understand, you said you held off presenting this, waiting for the census and something else here. I wrote, how did that inform this? How did that change what you were doing?
So for the second thing that we were waiting for was the strategic plan. So the strategic plan was revealed, influenced or shared with everybody this past August. And so that's what we wanted to make sure that if there was anything in that strategic plan that would further, that we would need to align the strategic the multi-year plan to, we wanted to make sure we had that opportunity. And also the previous draft was for 2023, 2025, and that was based off of the internal discussions of the advisory committee. But knowing that we were anticipating the new strategic plan, there was a determination that we wanted to align it with the same years as strategic plan.
And through you, Chair, a lot of the strategic plan really does focus on what we will do with and for community and leveraging the voice of community. So one of the projects you'll see that Candace shared is around improving feedback mechanisms to make sure that, to your point, what you are hearing, we are hearing as well, right? Because it's a bit of a stopgap if you're hearing it and it doesn't filter back through us. So all of your feedback, we would highly encourage all SEAC members to go into that link that we're going to share with you and share your feedback that you're hearing from your organizations and the people that you support, because in that way, then we can be more responsive and make the adaptations that are necessary.
And the census, was that helpful at all?
So with the census, we were anticipating some further analysis, but what we did find was that there was a lot of data, and the data was sort of disseminated to the individual schools. So the information is there. What we're currently working on now with the research team is sort of taking the data and doing an analysis to see if we can pull some additional information as it relates to accessibility, or how students are feeling, whether they have a sense of, being able to access things in school. So unfortunately, the information wasn't right off the bat helpful to us in terms of having that information right up front. So we do need to go back to the team to kind of look at that information and do a further analysis.
And what did you have voice of the student in all your work up until now?
Sorry, in terms of the accessibility plan, we have not gone to the students. And again, we were hoping that the student census would be able to provide us some feedback.
And just regarding your feedback tool, you have an email address that I believe no one is actually looking at. I've sent things to that email and never received anything back, and that's been over a year at least. So that email that you have in here, who's actually supposed to be looking at it?
That's actually run by our human or managed by our human rights office. We have been getting some. So what happens is that the emails come to that email address, and it's disseminated to whichever group the inquiry is for. So I will take that back to them because we just met with them recently, and as far as I was aware, that they were receiving information from there. You did identify and notice that there probably are easier ways for us to be able to get that information instead of just having an email address to send things to. So we have, with the help of some of our Rochelle here, we have created an electronic form that has questions. So it's a little bit easier to provide that feedback. But certainly these things are things that we have noticed gaps in and are looking to make it easier for everybody to provide their feedback, even at the school level and at the student or parent level as well.
So do you have data on what they've been receiving through that email address for the last 3 years?
No, I don't have the data, but we can certainly look back to see what information we can pull from there.
Yeah, because it's interesting to see the data that you're making these decisions on and how you're deciding what needs to be worked on, that kind of thing. Any other questions? I've kind of taken up some time. Last question would be, are you at all interested? In the past, we have had SEAC members that join your subcommittees. Is that of interest at all to the team?
We are certainly interested in that. I did put out a request earlier, a number of years ago, but I didn't receive a response from the previous superintendent. So we're happy to do that again. At the same time, we're happy to also come back here, present, take the feedback from you guys as well from this committee. So we're open to.
Yeah, because we've been asking to be involved in this for years at this meeting. So it's funny that you've been asking as well. So that's a little curious. So I think there's a number of people on this team that would be willing to help out, be interested in helping out with that. So I myself would. I don't know if there's other people around. So definitely be interested. All right. I would just ask if anybody else is interested. That's something you can put in that feedback form, please. Thank you. I will. Jazzy. Go ahead, Jazzy.
I was just going to add that I'm also interested if you can include me on those meetings or the process to get involved in the committee.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. So can I have a motion to accept we were going to receive the multi-year accessibility plan update. Okay, Nicole, second. Great. All in favor? Great, thank you. And next we have the annual calendar. Thank you, and through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is just to share with SEAC member the finalized agenda for the year. You will recall that in our last meeting, we sent it as a draft and asked for any feedback or additional places of interest. So we have solidified the calendar for the year with reports as well as shared with all the dates. Happy to answer any questions. We used to get reports and presentations from groups in this room. So I would encourage anyone that is interested or someone from their membership or something that wanted to come and present and tell us about your association. There is space for that on our agenda. Or if there's anything listed here that people in your membership are worried about or concerned with, let's get it on the agenda. Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have a concern that we're not going to get the ONSIS reports until April. Is it possible to get those sooner? They're done multiple times a year, so can we not get it sooner? I think PAC on SEAC recommends we get it in November.
Through you, Chair, we can look at having an earlier threshold. Thank you.
Okay, and also, we were supposed to get the, information about waiting times for psychoeducational assessments and IPRC information from last year, how many IPRC meetings were held for different exceptionalities.
Through you, Chair, we're having the, in addition to what's on the agenda for next month, we are having a presentation by Andrea Dewar-Salmon around psychoeducational assessments next time.
Okay, and can we also get the dates of this year's IPRC meetings for the different exceptionalities?
Through you, Chair, we can take that back. Just let me touch base with our team about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
In talking tonight with the census data, is that something you should end on here?
Through you, Chair, we can add that in because we were having an accessibility plan update in December. We can add that into that part.
All right, so can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the SEAC annual agenda and calendar? Barb, and seconded by Anne. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. All right, next we have the Special Education Department Professional Development Plans for 2024-25.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would like to ask Coordinating Principal Jack Bertrand and Coordinator of Professional Learning, Pat Campbell, to share this report.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. As outlined in the report, we have included all of the proposed professional learning opportunities for our department this year. Please note, as it mentions, that beyond December 2024, the system professional learning calendar hasn't been finalized. So what is in this is proposed and tentative based on final approval. We also, need to be responsive to system needs, and so dates and offerings will be updated regularly. And so we may see additional offerings of some sessions, or the dates may need to change depending on requests we get from the system and other needs that arise. So at this time, I just ask if there are any questions regarding this report.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, in 2021, there was a recommendation from staff, actually, that there be annual professional development regarding gifted identification and gifted programs, and I don't see any of that on here.
Through you, Chair. I can't speak to the recommendation in 2021, but with our new gifted chairs, we have met with them to go over the identification criteria and placement considerations for their field office IPRCs.
Yeah, this was for teachers. So teachers who would be teaching gifted students, which would probably be almost every school teacher in the school board. And it's not on here.
Through you, Chair, we do have an amazing coordinator for gifted education, Richard Lyle, who, along with gifted students over the summer, created a new website. And we are just working on a plan to roll out that learning with teachers. Not all of this professional learning, a lot of this has to do with release time, but we also offer professional learning in our department in many other ways. So through guided experiences, they can go onto the website, things like that. So we are currently working on that with our coordinator.
Would this be a SharePoint website?
Through you, Chair, it is on the internal website, accessible to staff. We just spent all summer redoing our whole website and just launched it at the special education conference to ensure that any teacher would have ease of access to all the information and resources for all exceptionalities. So it's been redone through exceptionalities, and we're happy to share that at a later time. It's quite impressive.
I just have a quick question. Is there an opportunity for our associations to provide some learning for the teachers and the EAs? Because I know when we were at the special education conference a couple of weeks ago, we had a booth and a lot of our EAs and teachers didn't even know that we existed. So it'd be really nice to be able to provide them the opportunity to learn more about not just Down syndrome, but even so much so what we can do to support the teachers within the community.
And through you, Chair, teachers have a right to learn in any way that they want. Generally, when we're talking about guided professional learning, we would do so in partnership, and much of what we do share are resources from community partners on our internal website. But teachers would have an ability, and that's why we were so pleased that some of you were able to come to our special education conference and really highlight the opportunities for educators and principals to have a deeper understanding of the supports that are out there outside of what we offer as a board. But much of our internal supports are links to external partners because we know there is a lot of expertise. So I thank you for that idea.
Sorry, this just all reminded me that all of the links in the accessibility plan, we can't access because they're all internal. Helpful, we can see some of the information.
Thank you. I'll take that back to this. Thank you.
So also when I look at these, I don't see, so we talked a lot about attitudinal and awareness training. Maybe I'm missing it, maybe it's embedded in these, but do you have any specific things we're doing to help staff?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, almost all of our learning starts with attitudinal learning around what ableism is and how we need to be anti-ableist educators. We talk about the culture of high expectations and believing in ability. That was really the predominant message of all of the learning that I shared in the special education conference. And that is embedded in all the learning that we do. We have to presume competence and ability for all of our students. And when we presume competence, then we instruct and offer them opportunities in a way that allows them to flourish, understanding also their needs and more supports are necessary. So it is integrated into everything that we do.
Is it possible that we can see what that looks like in a session?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, we're happy to share. We are currently getting ready for what we call a lead session. So a session for brand new principals. And we do a whole day of training on special education, and almost the first quarter of the day really does talk about exactly what we're talking about, how ableism manifests itself in schools, how often that's the predominant factor in decision making and things like that. So we talk about their responsibility and important role as an administrator, making sure that they're clearly aware of that. But we're happy to share a slide deck with you.
Last question. There was a lot of learning in the accessibility plan, a lot of things offered, and I didn't have a chance to kind of correlate them all, but they're definitely not all here. So how does one access training that we say that we give if it's not sort of listed here?
So through you, Chair, this is again in-person training with Release. We have what's called an online learning hub and our website. So there's multiple ways and multiple avenues and pathways for educators to learn. We have an online learning hub, which means that you do not need to be released to learn. You can access the learning. You can take course decks and go through what's called D2L. So it's course packs and they work in a system. We also have links through every exceptionality. Our new website is organized by exceptionality. And within each exceptionality, it talks about some resources and professional learning that you can take in each of the sections.
So can I assume that if it's not here, it's likely online training that I see in the other?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Right. Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives Special Education Department professional development plans for 2024-25? Andrew? All right, so the next one is the special education. All in favor, sorry. Thank you. And now we're on to the special education plan review and consultation.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I'd like to ask Coordinating Principal Jeff Bertrand and Coordinator Pat Campbell to please share this report and a new process for which we hope to have feedback at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Throughout this school year, we're going to be taking some time to review the standards within the special education plan, aiming to do about 2 at every meeting. So we're going to break into small groups and go through standards 1 and 2, what is expected from the ministry to be included in each of those standards, along with showing you where the feedback link is for this year's spec ed plan, which is publicly available and online. And so we wanted to spend some time making sure that everyone had access to that and to walk you through that process so that as we go through the review every month, you have the ability to provide feedback at that time or at any other time using the link that is online in the form that we've developed. So we're going to go to the cafeteria and sort of split into groups, and we may have to make some adjustments based on who's in the room and who's online, but we sort of have broken up SEAC members to meet with one of our coordinating principals. So the first group, and Kaz is going to run this group, has ABC, Fragile X, Down syndrome, and Trustee Benjamin. So I'll give that to Kaz. The second group, which is going to be run by Andrea, has Easter Seals, FAS World, Sawubona, and Trustee Clark is not here, so there's members there. The group that's going to work with me is Abilities to Work, Learning Disabilities, OPVIC, and Trustee Alves, who's not here. And with Erla is Autism Ontario Community Living.
So it was just recommended by the chair that because of the smaller group today and the high rate of absenteeism, that we just stay in the room and go over it together. If everybody is okay with that, quick adjustment. Is there anybody who would like a smaller group? Or is everybody okay with staying in this room today? Okay, I'm going to ask Coordinator Campbell to go over kind of what 1 and 2 is, and I'll hand out for anybody who did not print them out, we did print out the standards. Pat, if you want to share the high level overview of standards 1 and 2, and then we can, Mark, if you can at the same time open up the spec ed plan. I think that Pam shared with you and show where the feedback mechanism is. Thank you. Coordinator Campbell, thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. So tonight we're going to look at standards 1 and 2 of the special education plan. Standard 1 just looks at the board's consultation process, and standard 2 speaks to board's general model for special education. We have, I know you received them digitally, but we've also printed out some hard copies to make that a little easier for you to look at. You'll also find in the folders going out now standards 3 and 4, because we thought it would be great for you to have those hard copies ahead of time so you can make notes for next month. So we have a few guiding questions for those who, I know some may have already come with feedback prepared. We've got a few guiding questions, things to think about as we run through the standards. And those include, is the information clearly presented? Do you generally find it accessible? Is there anything that is a requirement of the standard that might be missing or inadequate? And very importantly to us, is there anything that you think could make the plan more accessible, more useful to parents and families so that we can improve that accessibility wherever possible? Now, those are not the only things you might think of. Those are just kind of get you thinking if you haven't already generated some thoughts. Now, I want to say though that the 2 standards that you have in front of you are not, there are no changes from the first two standards of the second plan that you would have just approved.
Yes.
So it is helping us, it's helping us plan forward around, how it can be improved and any changes that might need to be made. So there's nothing substantial, there's nothing different at all, really, from what you've already had access to.
And through you, Chair Mark, if you just scroll up, we have the special education plan now live on our external facing website. So if you just Google Peel Special Education Plan, if you scroll down a little bit, thanks, Mark. It kind of shares some highlights in there, and then it says provide your feedback. And if you just click in there, Mark. And this is, we'd love this to be shared with any of the community that you serve or families that are concerned. It talks about our ongoing feedback that we're going to bring twice monthly to SEAC. So it doesn't feel so overwhelming as per last year in May. So we'll bring in some in January. It says basically what's your first and last name, what's your role, including SEAC members. So we're only having one mechanism to collect all of the feedback, whether that be from a parent, a staff member, student, or SEAC, because we encourage students also to give feedback. Is there contact information? What standard the feedback is related to, so it's not so overwhelming again. From 1 to 17, you can pick one standard and do a comment, and then go back and pick another standard and make another comment, what page number it's related to, and then any recommendations. And this is all being tracked in partnership with our research department, who can draw conclusions and create spreadsheets. So when we are presenting to SEAC any of the feedback, we can provide our responses to it.
And through you, Chair, I'd like to add to that. Tonight, being the first time we're undertaking this review, we actually wanted to kind of slow things down and take you through the process to build your own comfort in putting in feedback from home, on your own time, using your own devices, etc. And so we've brought along some Chromebooks. If you don't have your personal device with you, we've got some Chromebooks with the login information on them, which we're happy to share with you. And I can walk you through the steps of how do you find the plan from through Google, because I know I can give you a link, but then keeping track of these links can be a little hard. How do you find the plan? How do you find the feedback form? And how do you submit feedback? So if you're on, yes, I know some people, you can try it on your phone, but forms tend to be a little quirky sometimes. So the username and password, are on each device being handed out. If you would like support in that login, because I looked at that password, it's like, could they make that password any more difficult? If you need just some help signing in, we're happy to help you.
We're willing to listen now if anybody has feedback, or if you want to just explore a little bit, well, that's fine, and we can talk about this mechanism for collecting feedback moving forward.
And perhaps people can browse while we get others logged in.
Quick question. So when we say through your chair, when we say the feedback, are we expecting feedback from parents or more of specialist education providers, community organizations?
Through you, Chair, we would hope for feedback from families, of course, and any organization as well. So we will receive it, and then we'll categorize it by we're working with the research department, so we'll categorize it by who provided that feedback. Was the feedback provided by a student, by a parent in our community, by a SEAC member, or an organization or other? So it's all filtered in that way. What standards are we receiving feedback about, and what was the feedback, so we can respond to it. Because last year it was shared that we didn't have a clear enough mechanism for collecting feedback, so we wanted to make sure we were transparent this year.
I think it's great that there is a public option there. I would just comment that probably 17 standards probably a bit overwhelming or confusing for parents who are not, specialists in special education. Perhaps an idea could be to have a separate button which simply says feedback from parents, which would be simply a text field, because I guess standards is 17 standards is not something that parents will be able to go through and digest and then give feedback on.
So through you, Chair, we are actually, the way it's up right now, they're just actually working on chapters. So each standard will have a separate link. So if they're wondering about transportation, let's say, they would click into that standard and then the feedback button's on the bottom of that standard. Or they're worried about, IPRCs, they would click into that standard and then be able to get feedback on that. So we are simplifying it for families because we're going to make each standard a chapter so they don't have to go through the entire special education plan to get to the information that they are looking for.
We're kind of just casually overlapping like a business, so yeah.
Thank you. And through your chair, I was just going to add, the expectation is really that parents would provide feedback on one or two areas of particular interest to them. But the form was created in a way that it allows for feedback on any aspect of the spec ed plan. So a parent could, as Superintendent Sciccato said, go in and just click on the IPRC and just provide feedback there. But by limiting it and identifying the standard, it makes it much more efficient for us to update things based on the feedback we're getting.
Okay, so I have a question. On page 8, under special education placements, in the indented paragraph that starts before IPRCs consider placement of the student. And then at the end, it says special education in Ontario K-12, which I'm guessing refers to the special education K-12 guide. On what page does that paragraph appear?
That's what I do too. That's what I printed it out. Oh, so go here. Here it is.
So sorry, to clarify, you're asking what page in the special education in Ontario? We can add that in as feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure offhand.
The name page. Yes. Yeah. What, how many of these are under 20? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Do I have to? Yeah. Just highlight it. I'm not sure actually. I can find it. Yeah. That's also.
I was gonna just try this is just recorded.
Because I think the contact information name should be optional. People can put it in or can choose not to.
Superintendent Chicago was saying there's, you hit a certain link. So that's like policy. Where is that? Not when we're reporting. Let's say what section we're making ready to be. So where's the part where she was mentioning?
So I was able to do
link it and bring it to that.
Okay.
No, I have the plan, but we're just trying, well, I have a few things. So here's the main plan, right? So do I get you full?
She said
That shows the long.
yeah, what if you show
No, it's just showing you how to be able to. So if you look at stuff.
Where's those standards? Like separate.
Just look at tools, or you just look at special education plan.
No, but this is just what you reported, but that's just
Yeah.
what section you're reporting on.
So
So the feedback is at the end or in each section?
Which, yeah.
maybe she's. What's about the?
Oh, yeah, just one second.
Wait,
So there it is, yeah. So you can go to the scroll down. Yep, then you're on it. So you have to scroll down. Yeah.
They have a digital. Oh, so it's this thing.
So goes here,
Yeah.
and then the link is here. The whole plan is here, and then the link is there, but we're changing this to be by standard. They just haven't finished it yet.
No, so what she's saying is if somebody wants to give feedback, do they have to go?
I don't know.
the entire plan?
Find where's the special education plan.
So where is the applicable chapter? That's the question.
Yeah.
We haven't developed it yet. So what happened is.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, now it's clear.
Okay, submitted it as a PDF so that it could be up right away.
There it is.
And then what happens in the background is that communications creates an HTML version of each section of it. So that takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
So right now, the unfortunate part is, yes, you've got to kind of scroll
You have
through
to,
the
no, one
sections
and
you're
two, you can,
interested
if you
in.
want to read it,
But
you
shortly ultimately you can just click on standard form, standard 60.
Okay,
And
so it's
then
not
come up as an
good.
option. Yeah, sorry, it's a technical glitch right now. It just takes some time for us to work out.
Chair, and I
Okay, so
want
we
to
can
give a comment on one, can you please put the page number on the providing document? So we take it on the regular consent. We can also be like, okay, we're gonna document that. We'll go to page.
Into.
This is what I think was, you said was missing
Feedback.
first year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't do it. So you can do it, you can read 1 and 2, and then that way, at the end of the year, we're not doing, 17 standards all of
Yeah, what's the goals, expectations, or something?
Has everyone had a chance to have a look at the system? Yeah. Good. I would say that if we need training on this, it's problematic to send that out to parents. That would be my only comment there. I mean, you actually work pretty well on the phone. But if there's,
That's good.
that would be my only, feedback with that. Shouldn't we have to train our parents in order to use feedback? So maybe we simple it. So I know it's good for you guys to have which section, all that kind of stuff, but I think it might just like the first thing they look at is a form and they can put their notes in there, or they can go down and be a bit more specific, I would say.
And through you, Chair, we are also always encouraging principals to fill out this form as well when they receive feedback from community, because we really believe that a parent's first point of contact should always be the classroom teacher and the principal. They are in relationship, and we would want principals. So this has also been shared with principals at the special education conference, and they have an ability to, because there is room for staff member feedback as well, that they can put on behalf of people. And it is going out in communication with a link. So hopefully when you press the link and you go right into the special education plan, that people will be able to navigate.
Thank you. I would say just in response to that, because I did see that as well in your feedback to our comments previously, that parents should just go to the principal if they don't understand. In a lot of cases, people are going to this document because they're not getting what they need from the principal. So sending them to their principal to understand it is not a great process, right? So I have a few comments on the actual first 2 sections, and it would be more links and things, because we've got, especially standard 2, it gets very confusing because we have all of this information. And I know you have a note that says this is all explained in section 9. But if there could be a link there, or links to describe some of these programs to make it a lot easier for them, so parents aren't trying to jump through all the different sections of the program or the plan. That would be one thing that would make it a lot easier for parents. Because I know that was one of the comments that came through from our last run through, is that it was complex and confusing to kind of figure out what's going on. So I think, and honestly, having this being your first introduction to the placement options, not great, because what does it mean, right? What do any of these things mean to them?
So through you, Chair, we could look at a different chart. We can take that back as a team.
I think the standard 2 is very useful. It is one of the most common questions that we get with the Autism Ontario is, what are kind of placements available? What is the other option? That's the most common question I get. And I think this document fairly clearly lays out what those documents are. So that's very helpful.
Comments or feedback?
Yeah, I have one on page 7. In support of these beliefs and understandings, the Special Education Social Emotional Learning Department. Can you put the acronym in brackets after that, so parents, when they read down further, can relate Cecil to Special Education Social Emotional Learning? I know you've done that in some other places, but it wasn't on here.
Yeah, and thank you. And through you, Chair, we will recall that we are now just special education again. So we will need to make those updates for next year, make those amendments anyway for next year, because we have moved away. Social emotional learning now resides within safety and well-being. But we can certainly look at making sure we're not using acronyms. Thank you for that feedback part.
Okay, and then on page 5, under communications with families, and it says parent guides. These guides, IPRC, IEP, specific programs, and communication classes, are these all things that are on the website, or are there hard copies that are available at the schools? Or is it just linked to a website?
Through you, Chair, we are sharing a draft of a guide to student review process for families as requested today through the motion action log. But we can look at where those links are.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking you can make links here to these guides that you mentioned. And also, you're saying there are a number of ways, but really there's only 2. The website and social media, because everything, monthly email updates, you don't send them to parents. You make the parents go to the website. Everything is the website. So it's kind of misleading.
Through you, Chair, I'd like to follow through on my initial promise to kind of just walk members through this process, and as we're hearing the feedback so that we can actually capture it in the feedback form. Some people have been able to access it, and others may not be at the same pace and same access. So I'd like to do that, get walk through. And if you're following along, I also encourage members to enter the feedback that you are giving them now so that it's captured there as well. Please. Can we do that? Awesome. That's great.
So, comment. Is it possible to partner up with the community organizations who are around this table to offer them to host the feedback form, if not the page itself, with the special education plan, but definitely the feedback form, and encourage their partners, members, organizations to offer feedback through that, because that might expand the reach of this a bit.
And through you, Chair, sure, if it's people who have students or family members or in Peel, definitely, right? We want to make sure that we are really focused on Peel students and families and supporting and serving them. So you are more than welcome to share the link for them to provide feedback, absolutely. So just wanted to touch base a little bit about the process and understanding we didn't have a full group and a full walkthrough as coordinator Pat Campbell shared. Do we feel like we were in smaller groups, and the intention was that coordinating principals would be documenting feedback that didn't quite happen today. So as she said, we would encourage you to go back and provide any feedback that you shared orally tonight through that website to make sure it's captured, if you don't mind. And then we can next week look at, the intention was that the coordinators and coordinating principals would be putting in the feedback on your behalf today. But because we were in a large group, that didn't happen. How do people feel about this as a system for providing feedback? Is there another method that you think would be more conducive to the way people learn?
I have a question about how often is this going to be looked at? But I'm concerned that Jennifer submitted some things and nobody's looked at it.
But that's a different spot.
So I've had issues with other spots, of course, there's no more.
So through you will recall that we gave a 50-page document at the end of last year, going through every single piece of feedback that SEAC provided in detail and providing a response to everything.
Yeah.
So since that date, this is a new launch. So we would be looking at, our intention is to spend a day monthly collating the feedback and providing responses, and to bring it to SEAC in January, up until that point to resolve that. And then again in April, so that we have any amendments ready for May, so that we've been collaborating throughout the year. So we do, our intention was to look monthly as a team and to bring it to SEAC twice a year.
Okay.
So it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So it doesn't, through your chair, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming at the end of the year.
Okay.
So what are we doing now?
So through you, Chair, if everybody's comfortable with the feedback form, then we can take the comments online. You can submit them online, or if you need support, then we can stay with you after and help you put the feedback in after.
I just need more time to.
Yes, and that's why 100% we didn't want, and the feedback form is live 24/7, so people can put feedback in at any time. Coordinator Campbell has included in your package standards 3 and 4. So in advance of our next meeting, you can go in and put your feedback in advance to give you more time. And if that's something that you like, we can provide the standards in advance, a month in advance. So at next meeting, we can share 5 and 6 so that, you know, the conversation will be more around the feedback has been inputted, but just a conversation.
So just so I understand, we're going to do this monthly. Feedback's going into the database. You guys are going to review that on a monthly basis. In January, you will bring back all of the feedback and what was done with it, as well as the new standards that you've rewritten, parts that you've rewritten based on that feedback.
So through you, Chair, will be very similar to the chart we provided you with what the feedback was, what the board response is, and if it required a change or update to our amendment to the special education plan.
Can I request that we see what that change was?
Yes, yes, that's how the form was last time. That we said no change necessary, feedback received, no change necessary, or feedback resulted in this language change. That's exactly what happened.
Well, it said we will make a change, and then we got the thing back, a list of changes at the back of it. So it'd be nice to see the actual change to the document that was done. Does that make sense?
So you want us to add as an amendment the 170-page document every time? Or just have a sentence in the chart that says what has been changed?
Correct. Yes.
Yes, that's what we did last time. Yeah.
We can take this off.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions, concerns? Oh, I don't have my speaker on. Sorry. Any other questions? Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee receives the Special Education Plan Review Consultation? Right, second, first, thank you. All in favor? Very. All right. Okay, Chair's request for written questions. Were there any written questions? Any reports from representatives? Do you have anything to report from their associations? Hang on, nothing online. Questions asked of or by committee members?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are the 2 central fairs that are happening, resource fairs. I think one in October 25th, sometime in April. One in Brampton, Dufferin, in Sile. So what exactly is the purpose of this fairs?
For you, Chair, I'm going to go back and review my notes because I know I spoke about it in my last report. Unless coordinating principal Bertrand recalls, because it was shared by coordinator Lisa Brazil.
That's what you share separately with him is Arts of Ontario wanted to participate in some of those, and we were not able to participate fully in the September event that we had here for the educators, where I was there, but we were not able to participate fully. So they wanted some updates in terms of these resource fairs and what's the purpose and how should they prepare for it.
Yes, I'll bring that back to you.
I can answer that, Superintendent Scott. So through you, Chair, the resource fair is really for
secondary students with developmental or intellectual disabilities and their caregivers to learn about supports and services available for post-secondary pathway planning, such as community programs, government supports, recreational opportunities, employment supports, and more. And so it's bringing together a number of resources from the community for families so that they have one place where they can go and look at different options and supports.
So it would be useful for the community organizations like say Autism Ontario to publicize to their audience so that there's adequate participation.
Sorry, Georgia, can you put your mic on?
Yeah. So it would be useful for, let's say, Autism Ontario to publicize those events on their websites and stuff, right? So is it possible to provide some kind of a write-up or for us to kind of use on our websites?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, we do have a flyer, so we can probably provide you with that flyer that you could share.
Yeah.
A parent recently contacted ABC stating that her principal advised her that the Peel District School Board now only uses the verbal section of the NGAT for assessing students for giftedness.
Through you, Chair, I'd like to ask Coordinating Principal Jeff Bertrand to share updates on the NGAT assessment.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, we are just finalizing our implementation plan for this year for the NGAT. And so we have reached out to ABC to discuss, what that's going to look like. And as well, we are reviewing the sub-tests that have been used the past 2 years and looking at potentially expanding to include all 3. We're just finalizing that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we're on to motions for consideration. There are no motions tonight. Any notice for motions? We're on to the motion action log.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, there was a question about the special education plan document on the website for feedback. And you will have seen today that we have put the special education plan up on the website and have, with the support of the research department, added the ability for SEAC members and family and community to all provide feedback to the plan. The second was a request around the inclusion of the location of contained classes. So we discussed this as a team, and due to the constant change in location of classes, we are not going to be putting information on the websites around locations, but would certainly share that through the IPRCs and considerations with families for their placement conversations. So we will share that with individual families when it's needed. There was a question around the use of assistive technology and training for students. As you know and shared at our last meeting, there are 2 main mechanisms for supporting students with SEA. One comes through Vice Principal Kaz McGowan and his team, and also the other through innovation and research with the EdTech and Innovation portfolio. So I connected with Superintendent Bernadette Smith, and she shared a high-level overview of what her team is doing in providing comprehensive professional learning opportunities and targeted training for whole class. Whereas our team focuses on individual students with SEA claims. They facilitate whole group learning opportunities, workshops, lunch and learns that focus on implementation, effective use of various assistive technologies that are tailored to meet the diverse needs of students. These sessions emphasize hands-on and practice real-world applications, enabling educators to confidently incorporating technology into their programs. At Tech Innovation, RTs also offer ongoing support through resource sharing and resource creation to whole class instruction. So that is in combination to what the SEA RTs are doing with individualized student support of the use of technology, not only for the student, but for that teacher to make sure that that student has access. There was a request for the for the organizational chart to be provided in a digital format. And that email was sent by my administrative assistant on October 3rd, 2024. There was an update to the SEAC brochure. So the committee members requested to have the SEAC brochure updated. And we have updated that. I think it's one of the handouts. Is that the SEAC brochure here? Okay, we will send a link tomorrow. I thought we copied it out.
The link doesn't work that was sent.
Okay, so we have updated it based on, because it still had the former superintendent's name on it and some members who were current here. So it has been updated, but we wanted for SEAC to have a look at it and see if any additional changes were requested or necessary. So I will have my assistant send out a PDF of the existing document with updated names to see if there's any other additional feedback around SEAC. And then we can make sure the link on the external facing website is working once we have that updated, so that can be done. All the changes were made. There is, we're going to hold on to that for now, but there was a request from SEAC to talk about parents' ability and knowledge around the student review meeting. We had a writing team do a writing project around making sure that parents know every step of the student review process and how and they should be involved and what their rights are, including dispute resolution, which was talked about here. The draft in a Word document is completed. We're just working with our communications department and media department to make that into a brochure. The initial draft is very word heavy, so I'm a little bit concerned about the level of accessibility for our families. Even though we have on the document, this is important information, please translate. It is very word heavy as written because it's so full of detail. So we're looking at taking it back to our central team and having more flow charts and arrows. So it's more less words and kind of more step by step. So before we brought it to you, we wanted to let you know that it is completed in draft, but we feel like additional revisions and maybe, with the help of our media department can make it more accessible to families who may not have a higher level of language acquisition or have a second language. So that is being done as well. There was a request at our last meeting for communication pathways for SEA for families. So how are families being notified that their students are receiving SEA support? And I want to thank Vice Principal Kaz McGowan here, who's going to share the drafts of the letters that are going out to families. Go ahead.
Through the chair, thank you, Superintendent Sugado. Thanks to the suggestions from last month's meeting. The first communication is the invite to SRM, just so that schools will be sending that home to let families know that they would like to initiate an SEA claim for technology for their student. So there's awareness before it even starts. And then once again, whenever the claim is completed, the student has received their technology or mobility sensory equipment, there is a second and third letter that once again, the school will be sending home, telling them that their student now has the technology, mobility, or sensory equipment. It also lets parents know about training and resources that can be accessed at home. So thanks for that.
So these templates have been shared with all principals, and most importantly, the CRTs are aware of the templates, and we'll be asking them to be shared directly with families to make sure we have transparent communication. Governance training for SEAC members was a request, and a conversation with the governance officer, Jasmine Borkovic, who is online with us. Thank you for being here. The training will be a part of the December meeting, and it will be hosted by governance. So if there's specific requests for what SEAC would like to learn in training about governance, please, you can email my assistant and let her know what you'd like to see. If not, governance officer Borkovic will be focused on the training during the meeting in December. And the final request was the results of the ADHD writing team. We are pleased to share that our summer ADHD writing team created a comprehensive whole day of learning for teachers and educators that currently is being vetted by our department and the curriculum department as well. And our first day of training will be in December. And we have, I think, over 150 teachers already signed up for that training. So that was a request based on one of the delegations from last year. And so that is just going through the vetting process as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Or go ahead.
How often do the location of the contained classes change?
So through you, Chair, it depends on if we're increasing classes or not. And it also depends on transportation. So I don't have a number of how often they change.
Like through the school year?
Oh, never during the school year.
Then why can't you put the locations in the special education plan? They've been in the special education plan since at least 2006, probably before.
Yeah, well,
and it says the annual plan is updated annually, so.
Sure, it's not a requirement of the special education plan to have locations on there. And our department just thought it was best that those programs and individual families had conversations through IPRCs about placement options.
I think it's best, and probably everybody will agree with me here that's on SEAC, that the locations be public.
Thank you for that feedback.
I agree with her. Any other questions or comments? Online? Of course, I have a couple. So there's a lot of great things about the use of assistive technology and the training that EdTech is providing, but can you give me some specific examples of that and how it would come about? Like, is it requested by teachers, first of all? Is it forced on teachers? How is it?
Through you, Chair, no, our EdTech is based on either principal kind of doing whole school. A lot of times they do whole school staff meetings as a part of their goals, their SEAC goals. You know, having access to technology is an equalizer for many students. So principals could request the support from their EdTech from a whole school perspective, or individual teachers can reach out to the EdTech resource teacher and ask for some training and learning. So it can happen in multiple ways. There's also superintendents who bring their EdTech and their CRTs to family of schools meetings, and they do training for principals. And from that, you get a lot of principals who want to continue that learning with classroom teachers.
And give me some examples of what they're teaching.
I don't know if through you, Chair, I'll ask Vice Principal Cass to answer that question.
Through you, Chair. So some examples that the EdTechs are supporting classrooms with are Orbit Note. So that is an accessible Google extension helping students read inaccessible texts. So educators want all students to learn how to use that rather than just students with IEPs. There is also MindDomo, Read and Write for Google Chrome, and Lumia would be some of the big accessibility tools that we use in the field to support.
And you had said that they were sort of going to be taking over the 30%. You guys, last time we talked, because the a number of ATRTs that we originally had was actually less than we got OTs in place of them. There was talk that they would make up the difference in this training. So how are we ensuring that certain percentage of the time is actually being spent on special ed and not, robots in the library or whatever else they're doing?
Through you, Chair, I can ask Superintendent Bernadette Smith and her coordinating principal, Tony Mosconi, to come back with their mechanism for tracking.
Perfect, thank you. A separate note, I think we might need to look at the emails because I'm hearing from some people that
comment. In terms of EdTech, is it possible to co-opt Edinok to have them come with the ADRS softwares, which are used as part of the kids who cannot vocalize, non-verbal. So softwares like LAMP and stuff for which school board itself may not have in-house resources, but Edinok does. So it may be possible to co-opt them to, and anyway, they are partners for, most of their services anyway. So they may be co-opted to provide that part of the EdTech plan.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure if occupational therapist supervisor Michelle Zitlick wants to answer that question, or it's something you want to take back.
So through you, Chair, that would be very student specific based. We have SLPs through ADRS that align and work with our internal PDSB SLP. So they'll work together to support students if there is a communication device that the child or student needs.
Okay, so these are ADRs trained or provided by ERINOC who have expertise in those kind of softwares that are used in ADRS services, right?
So through you, Chair, the ADRS SLP from Erin Kids will work alongside the PDSD SLP and they'll work together.
So that's already part of the, okay.
Yes.
Thank
you. Email, yeah, so I personally didn't get the org chart or the draft, and I don't know about other people around the table, but I have been hearing there is 2 email lists going around and people are getting stuff or not. So we need to have a look at what email list are being used, and I need to look at my junk mail probably.
I don't mind the junk mail. Like the agenda was in the junk mail, but the org chart was somewhere else. So I don't know what's up.
I'll check it.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, that's sent by my assistant Pamela, and she has a distribution list. So perhaps I'll have her this week verify email addresses, and then you'd have to work with your own email, making sure that you don't make sure it doesn't go into your junk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's still this one. Oh yeah, we had talked about the training in December being not part of the formal meeting.
Through you, Chair, if that's the preference of SEAC, we can certainly work that out. If people would rather have it on a separate, because it makes the meeting really long, we understand, but if it's a preference of SEAC to have it on a separate day, that's something we can certainly bring out.
How long is this training?
Through you, Chair, I think that our governance officer, Workapic, is still online. I'm not sure if she's able to answer that.
Yes, through the chair, I believe the last governance orientation was approximately 20 minutes long in February 20 of 23.
Okay. So we're expecting it to be the same.
Yeah.
You prefer off? I said take that to the committee.
Can we not just come in early, like at 6:30 and do it?
Or at the end, I don't know what people working, like I know it's sometimes hard to get here.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we're just talking about training. Governance is going to give us some training as whether we want it within the meeting itself or outside of the meeting.
Through you, Chair, we'll take that back and look at other options and perhaps send an email that doesn't go to junk mail and ask for some input.
Yeah, if it's 20 minutes, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't want to spend a lot of
Another
time
hour,
on training when we could be doing SEAC.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
And last question, these letters, will they be sent in electronic format as well? Because paper always gets lost for a lot of our kids.
Yeah, through you, Chair, yes, there could be multiple ways that can be sent home electronically or it can be printed off.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That was it. Okay. We don't have to motion, but we are at number 15, adjournment. Can I have a motion that the Special Education Advisory Committee adjourns this meeting at 9:14? And we have Nicole and thanks everyone. We'll see you next month.
And a special thank you to Jennifer for sharing. Thank you.